Hi, and welcome to the School Health Educators Podcast, where we discuss health education and how to best teach health ed in the K 12 setting. Hi, welcome to the School Health Educators Podcast. I'm your host, Lori Reichel. And today we're going to talk about consent. And we're going to talk about how we can teach about consent for our students in the school setting. To help me out is Erica Scott. Erica Scott and I are both members of the Sex Education Alliance that the wonderful Kim Cook and some others put together some years ago. And so she had reached out to me to see if maybe she can share some of her wisdom to help people teaching health education in the pre-K through 12 setting. So thank you so much for being here today, Erica. Would you like to say hello to our audience and also tell us a little bit about who you are?
Everyone, thanks so much for having me. My name is Erica Scott. My pronouns are they, her. I live on the unceded and stolen territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and other Coast Salish peoples. And I got into this through lived experience. So I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, and that really impacted my boundaries. I've had issues with my boundaries all my life. And when I learned these tools and these exercises, which I have expanded on, it helped me so much with my boundaries, with interactions. And I realized that everyone needs this, and especially young people could use this. So, as a mom of adult children as well, I saw that um, even people who have not experienced child sexual abuse are really struggling with their boundaries because of many factors in society, and I'll go over those. Um, and there's a lot of confusion around consent and how to teach it. So I'd like to give you some tips. I do teach an online course that a lot of sex educators take. Um, but today I'm just going to go over briefly the the main points of what I teach.
Thank you. And thank you for being so candid because this stuff does happen.
Mhm. Absolutely. And one of the things that makes consent more complex is past trauma. A lot of us have it, and it affects our boundaries. It affects how we interpret the way people are acting towards us, and it affects how we respond. And that can make consent more complicated. Even when you're interacting with someone who's not trying to be abusive, um, it can become an issue if you have a history of trauma. So that's one of the things, one of the factors that makes consent more complex than people. So one of my issues with consent education is it's happening in. And okay, before I get into that, I'm so glad that consent education is happening. When I first started doing this, it wasn't, and people were like, "We teach consent. What's that?" Now it's happening. Now it's being added to the curriculum in different places. That's wonderful. And we can do better because in a lot of places it's still being taught in a way that's low-key victim blamey, that's really focused on just say no, have better boundaries, know what you want, be firm. And I want us to focus on hearing no graciously as the most important consent skill that we can all get better at. Recognizing no. Sometimes a no comes without the actual words no. Sometimes a no can even come with the words yes, sure, okay, I guess. But that doesn't make it a yes. So, one thing we do is we tell young people only an enthusiastic yes is a yes. But then we don't show them what that means, what that looks like, what it feels like to be enthusiastic. How do you check in with yourself to notice how you're feeling? There are so many skills involved in consent and having better interactions. And they can't just be talked about as well. They need to be practiced. So the exercises that I teach give young people, give people of any age a chance to, in a safer environment, practice these skills without touching each other and experience what it feels like to have your no on, experience what it feels like to check in with yourself and notice whether you're a yes or a no. Experience what it feels like to ask for what you want and have that appreciated, and actually feel what that feels like. And then hopefully now you have an embodied sense of these skills and you have better access to them later when you're in a more high stakes situation.
So, Erica, you wrote the book, Creating Consent Culture, a handbook for educators. And are some of these lessons in the book?
Absolutely, yeah. And I co-wrote it with Marsha Paczynski, who has done a lot of great work around this in her life and is now very much focused on asking for what you want, which is a skill, another consent skill that many of us could get better at. Yes, in that book, we go over the exercises themselves and also why you do these exercises and what's the underlying thing that we are combating, because um, it's not just teaching the skills is great, and that's what we need to do, and that's the fun part. But we also need to understand that involved in all of this is an unlearning. We've all grown up in, some people call it rape culture. In the book, we called it coercion culture to create a larger umbrella because consent is about so much more than sex. We've all grown up learning the wrong thing through media, through socialization, and we need to have compassion for ourselves and each other around that. And if I leave with one message, I would say, let's bring that compassion piece into this work. Um, because uh, this is triggering for people. When people teach this work, when people learn this work, they remember things that were done to them. They remember things that they did to other people. All kinds of stuff comes up. We need to have compassion because none of us knew this before, and we shouldn't act like they should just automatically know it. There are so many reasons why young people and people in general might be confused about consent. Um, Beyond the past trauma, we're inundated with messages in the media that are conflicting and confusing. Um, in popular movies and shows, uh, behavior such as stalking is shown as romantic. Um, One of the tropes that I really can't stand that just keeps carrying on is this idea that when people are going to fall in love, when they first meet each other, they have to hate each other first, and then they fall in love, which has confused generations, I think, about how this actually works. Um, and and then of course there's porn, which has become more and more violent and coercive over the years, and also more accessible to people. And so there's a lot of very confusing messages that they're getting. And then if we're coming to them and saying, it's really simple, either they say yes or no, and uh, you just need to listen, then we're that's again, that's shaming. It's making, if they have questions, if they're confused, then now we're just making them feel badly about that. And they will have questions and they will be confused. Uh, Depending on where you are, even just the laws can be confusing. In Canada here, if you're a young teen, there's a chart to show who you can and can't go out with, depending on your age, a couple of years above, a couple of years below, and it changes. So it's not simple. None of it
Yeah.
is simple. And then there are questions of sobriety. Do people have to be 100% sober? Teens have questions around this that we need to respect and understand that they are dealing with more nuance than just yes or no. And what we talk about in the book, we talk about moving away from the permissive model of consent. This whole idea that one person asks and the other person says yes or no, and moving towards a collaborative idea of consent where we want to play together. Everyone everyone has things that are more fun for them. We put things on the table, we take things off the table, we decide what is the best thing for both of us. We are still stuck in this concept that is really rooted in a 1950s kind of heterosexual paradigm where the guy asks, the woman is the one who says yes or no. Um, but she doesn't ask for what she wants. Like, this is so outdated. It's not, that's not real consent. Real consent happens when everyone can ask for what they want. Everyone can say yes or no, because that's another thing in that where you know, the men and boys feeling like they can't say no, being told that there's something wrong with them if they say no, they're supposed to always want sex. Um, there are so many myths built into this paradigm, and we need to get past it. And we're still not past it. I taught a grade 5 teacher last year, and she asked her kids, her students, can a girl ask a guy out? And the guys were like, yeah, sure, anytime. And the girls were all like, no way, no, we would never do that. Then they're going to think less of us, or they're going to think we're thirsty and we can't do that, where it would be weird. And the guys were all like, oh no. But this is still the idea that's being sent out through the media, through society. Girls asking for what they want is bad. Girls wanting anything is bad. Guys are supposed to know what they're doing, no matter if they've had no experience. They're supposed to take the lead and direct what's happening. If a girl knows more, she's supposed to hide that because she's not supposed to know more. There's all these old ideas that are still being propagated. And when you look at all the factors that go into making consent complex, it feels daunting. But when we do these exercises, it's actually really fun. They laugh, they have a good time, and they learn these skills. And a lot of times they'll have these aha moments of like, oh yeah, okay, it is okay to ask for what I want. And that's really beautiful. I sometimes say, fighting rape culture is hard, but creating consent culture is actually fun.
I'm, I'm glad that you said a little bit ago that we recognize porn has made an impact regarding consent. And I know that Heather Karina recently wrote a piece, I think it was in April's New York Times, about some of the imagery that young people are seeing, and it's increasing more violent acts. So thanks for bringing that up. That is one of the realities of what kids are exposed to, and we really need to go over, consent for sexual activity as well as other things. So if I can ask you some very concrete questions of, like, what are your top 3 recommendations for health educators? What do you recommend they do?
Okay, so first of all, try to learn as much as you can about being trauma informed and bring that into your um, consent sessions. Kids should always have the option to leave if they need to, or put their head down on the desk. There should be school counselors available in case they need to talk to someone. People may be triggered. If you do these exercises, I always make it optional, but I really encourage them, these are fun, and the more you do it, the more you'll get out of it. Um, so that's one thing. The second thing is really focus on that these are skills that we can learn, that we can practice, and that they need to be practiced. And I teach people to thank other people when they say no. And so it starts out with really simple exercises where they ask for a hug and they say no. And then we talk about how, even though I told them to say no, it was hard and they laughed and they made a joke out of it. And we go over the reasons why it's difficult to say no, because understanding the underlying problems is where the need for the skills becomes obvious, and you move into it. So we talk about why it's hard to say no, and they can come up with a lot of reasons. We don't want to let people down. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. We don't, we want people to like us, etc. Now I get them to do it again and then say thank you. And then we talk about how that felt. And I ask them how, and a lot of times they'll say it's weird, it's awkward to thank someone when they say no. But then we practice it. They get up, they walk around, and they practice saying no and thank you in ways that feel comfortable to them. Like, oh, that's cool. Oh, thanks for letting me know what you want or don't want. Or, hey, thanks for letting me know what your boundaries are. Whatever it is, a way that feels comfortable for them. And by the end of the workshop, it's not weird anymore, and they're just doing it. And it really shifts things. When you feel like your no is not only going to be heard, but appreciated, that really shifts something inside you. And now I think you're really going to notice when that doesn't happen. So that's the main skill I really focus on is hearing no graciously, recognizing no. We have another exercise where they have to say no to things they want to say yes to, and they have to say yes to things they want to say no to. And then, of course, they're making all these faces and doing these things. And we talk about what it looks like when you're not enthusiastic, and how to recognize that. Also very important, getting them to check in with themselves and notice how they're feeling. And I use the word notice on purpose. That is because we can always change our minds, and it's normal and to change our minds. Our feelings are always changing. So it's important to notice what we're feeling in this moment, and if it's changing. A lot of us can get into trouble that way by not noticing that our feelings are changing as something progresses. I talk to them about the difference between liking and wanting something. You might like sushi, but that doesn't mean you want sushi right now. So great to know what you like, but notice what you're wanting right now. And we have exercises for checking in with ourselves.
So you said earlier that the first thing that a teacher should do is to recognize what trauma-informed education is about, because things can be triggering. So how do you make sure that you set up an environment that if someone is feeling triggered, they're okay?
Right. I mean, you can never guarantee that everyone's going to be 100% okay. This is a safer environment, though, for them to be triggered and have resources available to them. So you just make sure they know that there's somewhere for them to go if they need to talk to someone. Often during or after these workshops, kids will go and talk to the school counselor and disclose abuse. That happens. And we just need to have that set up and in place. Just by saying, this topic brings up stuff for people, and it's okay to have feelings. And if the feelings become too much, it's okay to leave the room, go to the washroom, get a drink of water. It's okay to put your head down on the desk. And it's okay to sit out and exercise and watch, but I just really encourage you, the more you do, the more you'll get out of it.
I appreciate that you said, first set up a safe environment. It'll be a safer environment because some people, it seems like they want to not have people reflect and note this happened. And my professional philosophy has always been, if a child can get help sooner, they can be healthier sooner. Like, yeah, it might be triggering. And I used to work with elementary school children in the first job I had as a school health educator. And I did a program that dealt with, it was with puppets. It was the Babes program at the time with these puppets and stuff. And one of the lessons talked about inappropriate touch. And when I did that lesson with children, it was very exhausting because it is so emotional and so many children reacted like, oh, that's not right. And then there's a lot of disclosure, yet I want these children to get help as soon as possible and to recognize there are safe people we can go to. So let's start the healing process sooner.
Exactly. And you brought up something that I think is important. A big part of being able to hold a trauma-informed space is to work through our own trauma and recognize our own trauma responses. understand how we respond and how we feel when things come up for us, and um, be prepared for that, and understand that we may need to take a breath or leave the room. It's possible. So, or, hopefully get to a place where you aren't going to be triggered like that before you're teaching this kind of stuff. But also to have compassion for yourself as well. This brings up stuff for people. And it's very hard to hear children disclose abuse. It's really hard to, and I have, I'm not sure if I have it listed on my website, but as part of my course, there's the best practices for, you know, hearing disclosure, for receiving disclosure. And, you know, a big part of that is not projecting any of your stuff into it. Just
Yeah.
being able to listen and receive and be calm and steady. So yeah, that's part of it.
Erica, thank you so much for bringing up that you have a website. I just pulled it up on the screen so those people that are watching the School Health Educators podcast on the YouTube channel, they can see it. Can you tell us a little bit about your site? Because there's
That's
a bunch of resources here.
Yeah, that's the resources page.
Okay.
If you go to the homepage, it says more about what I'm doing right now. You do have a reader's guide for educators. And on the About page, you can see some of my certified facilitators. So I have been teaching people online in Europe, in Africa, in North America, how to lead these exercises, how to do this workshop. And these are just some of the people that have been certified. I'm still getting more up on the site. Um, and and then in the trainings, it shows the different kind of trainings that I do. So I do Pro D Day presentations. I do train the trainers for educators. Um, and I do the workshop in schools. I can come and do the workshops in schools. So yeah, and I also have consent lesson plans on Teachers Pay Teachers and on Learn Worlds. I love working with people. I love collaborating with people. So if you have an idea for us to collaborate together on a project, don't feel shy to reach out. I love doing that. Oh, I have a blog. There's some podcast interviews and articles in there as well.
Wonderful. So since we're coming to the end of our recording today, do you have any last comments for our listeners?
Okay, so one of the things that students and people in general tell me is that the most important thing that they've heard in the workshop is when I talk about the freeze response. Most of us grew up learning about fight and flight, but it's actually fight, flight, freeze, and
Freeze.
fawn. And I don't know enough about fawn, but freeze is actually the most common response to sexual assault, and it's the most common response to children as well. And because the freeze response isn't very well understood, it leads to a lot of victim blaming and shaming, even by victims themselves. And when we can teach people about the freeze response, we can give them a lot of relief from that. So it's so important to me to spread the word, and I hope you do too, about that the freeze response is an autonomic response. It happens in less than 15 milliseconds. It's out of our conscious control. It's what the body has decided is our best survival strategy. And one myth about sexual assault is that it's a loud thing where there's fighting and yelling. In fact, it's generally very quiet with not a lot of movement because the victim is having a freeze response. Then people afterwards are like, why didn't I fight back? Why didn't I say no? I know for myself, when I didn't understand about the freeze response, I blamed myself and thought, I must just be a wimp. I must not have what it takes to fight back. When I learned about the freeze response, I was like, oh, this explains things because it's so
Yeah.
weird. You don't feel like you can do anything. So, and you can't, your body has shut you down. Um, So we still don't have enough understanding of the freeze response in society, police, courts. So we need to spread the word so people understand. that this is the most common response to sexual assault. And um, if someone tells you that they didn't say no or they didn't fight back, rather than questioning them why, tell them they probably had a freeze response
Right.
and that it wasn't their fault. Their body was doing what it needed to do to survive.
That is such a great point to bring up because that fight or flight, we heard that for so many years in psychology and all. Yet we do have this frozen. We're frozen. So
Much
thank
more
you for
common.
bringing that up. Yeah. And if somebody wants to get in contact with you, how can they do that, Erica?
Yeah, I have all my contact information on my website, creatingconsentculture.com. I also have a Facebook page and I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, both as me, Erica Scott, and as Creating Consent Culture. Um, and please do reach out. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to talk to you. And yeah.
Thank you so much for your wisdom, for sharing your wisdom.
And I would like to say, keep up the good work. Sex educators, you are heroes. And it's times, and every one of you is a hero. And thank you for what you do.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much for being here. And to our listeners, I will have links for Erica's information and for how to get in contact with Erica. It'll be on today's description. So I thank you so much for listening in. And please remember to follow this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and give us some 5-star ratings. That'd be wonderful. Also, please check out the School Health Educators website. That's schoolhealtheducators.org. And remember, you make a difference. You matter. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and stay well, folks.